very good morning and a warm welcome to all of you, and also to our speaker for today, Encik Kabir Ahmad. Thank you for taking the time to attend this webinar today. We appreciate your presence. Our talk today is the 26th of our continuing series of webinars focusing on Malaysia's competitiveness performance and ranking as assessed and reported yearly by international organizations. IMD, short for the International Institute for Management Development, published this performance and rank for many countries in their World Competitiveness Yearbook. So do the World Economic Forum, also known as WEF, in their Global Competitiveness Report. In the recent Competitiveness Yearbook 2020, also known as WCY 2020, Malaysia's competitiveness ranking has dropped to 27th position from 22nd in 2019 out of 63 countries assessed by IMD. This overall competitiveness score and rank is calculated based on 255 criteria, comprising 163 hard data and 92 survey data. And these are categorized into the 4 competitiveness factors of economic performance, government efficiency, business efficiency, and infrastructure. In our talk today, our speaker, Encik Kabir, will be presenting on redundancy costs, which is a criterion in the category of business legislation within the government efficiency factor. I'm sure Encik Kabir will enlighten us on what is this redundancy cost all about, and also elaborate further on this criterion in the context of competitiveness measurement, as well as share with us his findings and recommendations to improve Malaysia's performance and rank for this criteria. So now let me first introduce our esteemed speaker before handing over the session to him. Encik Kabir Ahmad Muhammad Jamil is an honorary certified Asian Productivity Organization, that's the APO, a productivity practitioner. As a qualified Six Sigma Black Belt and a well-known lean guru in Asia, he is a professional trainer and freelance consultant based in Malaysia. Encik Kabir have had a long and illustrious career at the Malaysia Productivity Corporation, also known as MPC. He started as a training and investigating officer and gradually moved on and moved up to various managerial and management positions such as marketing manager, maintenance manager, Senior Manager of Productivity and Innovation Networking Division, and Director of Smart Regulation Division. The experience he gained over the many years in MPC has given him a thorough understanding of the opportunities and problems involved in public and private sectors, especially in Malaysia. Encik Kabir is a well-known speaker locally as well as internationally, and has extensive experience in the field of training and consultancy, especially in areas related to process improvement, lean manufacturing, team excellence, and performance and productivity management in the public and private sectors, particularly in service-related industries. Most recently, he was involved in formulating the Industry 4.0 policy and designing the Industry 4.0 Readiness Assessment Framework for Malaysia. He also assumed the role of Chief Consultant on many regulatory improvement projects. Among those recently completed is the transformation project for the Malaysian Investment Development Authority, that's MIDA, improvement on export and import for the Malaysian Quarantine and Inspection Service, and the Vehicle AP process improvement for the Ministry of International Trade and Industry, or MITI. Many organizations have benefited from his expertise and experience, such as our Ministry of Health, Ministry of Primary Industries, Rubber Research Institute of Malaysia, Maybank, Sime Darby, UMW, Hitachi, Samsung, Petronas, Island and Peninsula, Tabung Haji Properties, Proton, DRB Highcom, PNB, and many more in Malaysia. At the international level, Encik Kabir has served the Asian Productivity Organization in Tokyo, the Chinese Productivity Center in Taiwan, the Development Academy of the Philippines, Thailand Productivity Institute, IPHRD of Iran, the National Productivity Organization of Pakistan, JICA, and then the Mongolia Productivity Organization and Vietnam Productivity Center on various occasions throughout his tenure. And with that, I now hand over the session to our speaker, Mr. Kabir. Over to you, Encik Kabir.
Thank you, Mr. Wong, for the very elaborate explanation about who I am. Anyway, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A very good morning. Of course, to our moderator, Mr. Wongs, to Chair Azhar, the organizer, and of course to the rest of the participants. First of all, once again, thank you for the invitation by the management of MPC. So I would like to take this opportunity to say thanks for MPC to select me to be one of the speakers here. And of course, earlier it was appointed me as one of the consultants to do the analysis on this redundancy cost. The topic that I'm going to share with you is a bit technical, and I'm not the HR expert, but when I was entrusted to study this indicator or criteria for that matter, so we were looking into the scenario of what is actually redundancy cost, and I will walk through with you, sharing with you understanding of the redundancy cost, and then I will go into the saying how does this ranking, the WCY give us where we are, and then we will see in terms of practice by the other country, and then finally I will put some recommendation that I think a very simple, direct forward, straightforward recommendation to the Malaysia government to undertake this. As you know, as you mentioned earlier, what they call it, the redundancy cost, I mean, is something that I would say something that we don't want to happen. We don't want to face this actually. We do not want to be redundancy, or for that matter, we don't want to be redundant in the company. So, but under the current scenario, you cannot, predict this. Today, I just got some unquoted figure about 750,000 people have been laid off because of the COVID. And imagine that, the big number, and how are these people going to face the storm? I mean, to weather the storm currently because of the situations. So in my presentation, I will mix between redundancy and severance pay. So it's actually the same. So please understand, sometimes I use severance, sometimes I use redundancy directly. And just the issue is that we know that redundancy is something that from the beginning, those days is a kind of practice that used by many countries to protect people from the risk of losing job. And again, as I said, it's an old practice. And the old practice is it effective or not? And this is other better approaches that we should be thinking about. So in this thinking, I will walk through you to my presentation. As mentioned by Mr. Wong, the focus of my presentation will be on the redundancy cost, and it's coming from the business legislation sub-factors, and it's actually under the factors of government efficiency. So if you can see, the link is actually direct to the government efficiency, and whatever those initiatives that within the government efficiency have followed. Of course, in this case, it's business legislation initiative, and that directly to link to redundancy. So what is actually redundancy cost? So assumingly, you have to be laid off. This is about laying off. I mean, it's a very sensitive issue. I was talking to Mr. Wong yesterday. It's something that a very sensitive issue, and the opinion that I'm going to share with you, the idea that I'm going to share with you is my personal view. It's not something to do with the MPC. Maybe if we want not agree with the opinion, please refer it to me, not to MPC, if the idea is not really something that you like to hear. But again, redundancy cost is actually basically the contractual, I would say, statutory contractual redundancy or severance payment, and this is something that we need to pay to somebody who have been considered redundant, and then by matter of law, this guy have been, or the group of people have been considered redundant, and they need to leave the company. So before leaving, so there's some process that you need to go through, and then you have to pay them some kind of redundancy cost, and this is the cost that we are referring to. So but remember, this redundancy is not dismissal. Redundancy is, when a workforce or somebody lost a job, and then the company or the organization later go and get somebody else and to fill up the post, that is not redundancy. So if you look at it, redundant here, I mean that if your job is been considered redundant, I mean it's no longer available, no longer relevant, so they intend to let you go because of the work is no longer applicable. So that is redundancy. For those who have been fired, like and then somebody replaced, that is not redundancy. So that is more like a dismissal. And I work in this area of dismissal with the industrial court, and under the MOHR, if you have been dismissed unfairly, you bring to the court and you're fighting with the employer, and it takes some time for you to settle the case. And on my initiative last time with the Pemuda, we see that on the average it takes about more than 2 years to settle the case. And imagine that this is on the dismissal, but redundancy is different. Normally, when we consider ourselves to be redundant, or the organization make you redundant, because if the technology make you redundant. I mean, look at it, bank teller. When those days you go to the bank, you can see maybe 10, 15 bank teller is there. But today, with all the machines, with the ATM, sometimes you don't need to go and see the bank teller. You can clear up your check. You can bank in everything. So the number is going to be lesser. Maybe last time, maybe you need 20 bank teller, but now probably you need maybe 5 or 10. So because of that, the bank will decide whether to let you go. And when they decide to let you go, that is we consider redundant. Again, let's say the job you were hired is no longer applicable already. If you go to the bank, if you go to the organization like manufacturing sector nowadays, under the industrial 4.0, you can see many works have been taken over by system. Been taken over. I mean, like if you go to the factory, those days you collect data, you are counting the number of production that you're coming out with. Today you don't have that anymore. You don't, because everything can be calculated by sensor. Everything can be because of big data, Internet of Things capability nowadays. Everything has been calculated for you already. You don't need a person that go around and collect the numbers like that. So your job is no longer valid. And then business losing down, okay, and or you under the COVID situation nowadays, the economic situation become like very bad. So you need to lay off because you want to maintain some number of people only. So this is some of the common reason for a company to, of course, another one maybe a company been bought over by some company, and then of course you do not want to hold every one of you in that company. Maybe they probably have half of these people to work with you, so the other half need to go. So this is redundant. They make yourself redundant within the company because of this valid reason, and this is allowable in our law. Of course, the impact of redundancy is tremendous. If you look at the coronavirus epidemic nowadays, if I'm the owner of the company, definitely the situation is that for me is to reduce costs, especially reduce the headcount. Is it wrong? No. This is something that you need to for survival, for the company to stay afloat, And then its redundancy exercise are normally expensive because the company have to pay a lot of money to those who have been redundant. Whereas at this time around, the cash is really needed by the company. So is that good? So if you look at the situation at the moment, you will see that the inclinations, when the WCY, the World Bank Group, being study about the practice of redundancy costs, or redundancy payment, their inclination is more toward the organization. Their inclination are more toward being positive to the employer rather than the employees that are affected. I mean, naturally, because under a situation like, you need to survive, without the company, even more and more company go bankruptcy and more company close down, and that's not going to be good for the economic reasons. So you need to keep the company afloat. You need to keep the company by, and if that happened to be through removing some people, and that's the reason why the redundancy practice is looked upon as one of the channel. What is actually for Malaysia, the redundancy payment is come under those who are eligible, I would say, eligible under the Malaysian Employment Act. When we say the eligible to go under redundancy scheme, basically these are those people who are actually, if you look at on the Schedule 1 of the Malaysian Act, you can see that those people with a salary of 2,000 ringgit per month. So those who are actually having a salary of 2,000 ringgit below, they are actually fall under the Employment Act. So of course there are some exception for those who actually work on using physical drivers, operators of machines and things like that. Even their supervisor that linked to their work. These people are allowable to even if they have more than 2,000 ringgit, if they said they have a 5,000 ringgit per month salary, so they are allowable to fall under this so-called redundancy. Employee are entitled, to some prescribed paid, and depending on the length of service of them with the company. So they are entitled to be laid off, and then of course to be paid with this some cash. Of course, the process, they say, how does if the company want to go about and apply for redundancy, they actually have to apply, request for approval from the labor department. And then, of course, after that, once the approval was given, then the process of selection who will be the choose for the redundancy, and then some consultation. Normally the company we have, let's say there's a union, and then you need to consult the union, and then probably sharing some situation with the union people here and there, and then. Of course, they also look into the probably suitable alternative like employment and putting you in somewhere else and things like that. And finally, of course, they have to follow through some minimum administrative requirement, like giving you some notice. In Malaysia, you have to give some notice for, if I said, you are working more than a certain number of years, so your notice period will be 60 days, or if you're working this period, maybe 30 days, something like that. And then only finally, the process of payment, they will calculate the payment, the amount that you owe by them to you, and they will channel the money to you. So basically, this is what actually the process of redundancy in Malaysia. I'm not talking about other country, but of course in Malaysia at the moment. All right, up to that point, I'm wondering whether I'm just giving you some slight introduction about what the redundancy is all about before I go into what I call it, describing where we are under this so-called WCY. Maybe Mr. Wong, do you have any question, or maybe some people probably ask question related to this matter?
Okay, thanks, Kabir. I'm looking at the question box here and also monitoring my WhatsApp to see if there's any questions that come in. So far, there's no question.
Okay.
Probably at this point of time, it's a bit early. You can proceed.
Okay.
To me, I think it's very clear what you have just explained about redundancy cost, which is actually linked to severance pay. I mean, from the laid off employee, it is what we get is the severance pay, or we call it the ISS, right? ISS. And then, oh, sorry, VSS in Malaysia.
Yeah.
And from the business or from the employer's perspective, it's a cost to them. So it's redundancy cost to them. Yeah. But for us, it's the payment, the compensation. Probably I just want to seek clarification here. So when we talk about redundancy cost, or to the employee is a severance payment, in Malaysia, I mean, according to the labor law of Malaysia, maybe it's different from other countries. Must it be voluntary? Just now I mentioned about ISS. Probably I was thinking about involuntary severance scheme. But in Malaysia, must it be voluntary? That means the employee must agree to it?
Yes.
Your view,
no, there are two cases. There is some scenario that you actually allow for people to volunteer for the redundancy. I mean, in Malaysia is allowed. In some countries they don't. They don't allow the voluntary scheme. But if let's say in a situation where you have no choice, that means you have to be redundant, and then you don't volunteer for that. But no, the law allow the organization to go through with the process, even you don't want to volunteer for it. So it's not redundancy is cost or payment is not something that you must be volunteer first, then only you're allowed to undergo it.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I'm saying this because I myself, as an employee, I myself have experienced this because I myself has gone through this VSS process myself when I was working in Motorola.
You see, there's two different things between the VSS retrenchment scenario, because if I mean, our salary, I'm sure your salary is not 2,000 below, and probably your salary at 50,000 per month, is it? So that is a different scenario. That is probably going to employment different schemes that of VSS. It's not considered to be redundancy schemes. So redundancy is only those who fall under the Malaysian Acts. So that's why I will talk about this later on the proposal later, that hopefully in the practice by the other developed nation, this something that going to be open to others. Even the one recently introduced by some agency also limited to category of people, not open to everybody. So for you, I'm sure not redundancy.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jacob. No questions yet so far. I think we can proceed. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe later for the questions. Yeah.
All right. If you look at the rankings that by WCY ranking from, I take this example from 2010 ranking until recent 2020, and you can see that our ranking are not changed very much. We have been lingering, at the number 52 for quite some time. From 2017, we already, scoring 52, 52, 52, and then if you look at the score also, even our score, I put two graph here, putting the ranking of Malaysia, and then I put a score that was given to us. The score that given to us is starting from 2010. Also, you look at it, nothing changed. 17.2. I do not want. If you ask me what happened in 2016, is it? Sorry, 2015, 14, 15 to 2017. There's some changes there. 2 years, there is some changes there. I mean, the score is different. I'm not sure. Maybe somebody with the new team that coming in and evaluated differently. But normally is 17.2. I mean, number of years we are 17.2. 17.2 here mean that 17.2 weeks, because under the scoring system by the WCY, there are calculated the redundancy cost by weeks of salary. So let's say the salary of 2,000 ringgit. So if you have a salary of like now 17.2, I mean our payment on average we have to pay is about 17.2 to the employee. So basically that score 17.2 weeks. So this is what our scenario. I mean, it's not good. I mean, we are not improving, we are not getting better, but I do not know what happened to it. But at the beginning when I saw this, and I find it a bit strange. And this is, if you look at the score, overall score, Malaysia at number 52, we're not doing good, yeah. But if you compare to a country like Singapore, Austria, USA, many other countries there on the top, you can see the redundancy period or redundancy cost is 0. So if you're wondering why they are number 1, all of them are not all at number 1, because the score is 0. When we say zero redundancy cost, meaning that they don't have to pay for redundancy costs, they fall different scheme now. Most of these developed nations have a different scheme. We will look into this later on. And from out of 63 nations, Malaysia's score has been at number 52. This is something not good. And even if we compare, of course, our neighbor is worse. I mean, like Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, maybe Vietnam. They are not, of course, Vietnam doesn't come into this, but they are not good in terms of ranking as compared to us. But if you compare other nations on top of us, like Taiwan, you see even Qatar are doing better than us. Why? So this is a scenario that was given by WCY of our practice on redundancy costs. So when we look around and study of this score, and then was searching for information, data that where does WCY got the information? Do they capture this data from somewhere? So we know that mostly they capture it from the Labor Department of Malaysia and MOHR in particular. And this information that channel to there, of course, in Malaysia you have a Labor Department Peninsula, you have a Labor Department Sabah and Sarawak. Of course, Sabah and Sarawak, they have their own practice, but luckily when we look into I go in detail about the civilian pay category or bracket that they make the payment to those affected people. The numbers are the same as the one in practiced by Labor Department in Peninsula. So basically, that's where the World Bank get. And WCY capture the data from the World Bank. And the World Bank actually get the information from the ease of doing business employing worker survey. So every year, and the World Bank will, circulate the survey, and then to all the practitioners in Malaysia, and the information related to employing workers will be asked. So they have a case study within the survey. Somebody who working for about 1 year in one company, and she is actually I think is receptionist or accounts practitioner. When he or she were going to be laid off, so there are many questions related to the issue related to practice of the human resource practices in Malaysia, including redundancy costs. So the question, the information that given by the respondent are captured, and then the World Bank will do the calculations about our score, and then of course under the World Bank approach, they actually consider 3 scenarios from the beginning in terms of how long that you take to give the notice period. So the notice period requirement is also taken into picture. There is some question related to the notice period, and then the severance pay itself, and then finally, of course, the penalty that you need to be paid if you are violating any of those requirements. So these are the scenarios that they are given under World Bank. Once they capture the data through this, they make the calculation, and voila, that's where Malaysia is. So if you look at the World Bank redundancy cost for Malaysia, mainly, and then if I look into it in detail, I can see that they capture it from the, of course, the employment regulations under the termination and layoff benefit. This employment regulation 1980 is the one mainly they use as basis of calculations. For Malaysia, if you are going to be redundant, and if your service is less than 2 years, you're entitled to have a 10 days wages for every year of your service. And then if you 2 years or more, and less than 5 years, you have 15 days for every year of service. And then if you work with that company continuously, I'm talking about continuously here, 5 years or more, then you are entitled to have 20 days for every year of service. So this is how we bracket our so-called redundancy payment bracket that we need to pay to those affected people. And because of this bracket, you will see that it affected us later. And this is one of the area that I would like to touch later on, and see how can we improve on this. As I said, the agency that related to, or regulators that related to this redundancy cost is, of course, MOHR and Department of Labor. And then I have an Malaysian Employment Act 1955. It's a base act that govern the Employment Act in Malaysia. So redundancy only applicable for these people who under the 2,000 ringgit. And then Employment Regulation 1980, basically on the termination and layoff benefit. Of course, we have a supporting agency like MEF, the Malaysian Federation of Malaysia, Employee Federation of Malaysia, and we have MTUC, we have union people, we have industry court, and of course we have SOCSO. So these are supporting agencies that maybe I will touch a little bit more on the supporting agency later on. But how can we improve our ranking in this scenario? So if you look at the way that World Bank do the calculation, or WCY for that matter, look into it, we know that the World Bank, as I said earlier, World Bank take into 3 areas of concerns. One of the notice period, then severance payment, and then the penalty. So in their question, they will ask you all this area, and then they do some calculation in certain area. And for WCY, they only take severance payment as an indicator, as a value. Remember, we saw it earlier in the number of weeks that they use for the ranking. Only these are the severance payment is only used for this particular indicator. So when we look at the severance pay, it's divided for Malaysia, it divided into two. To dictate how much you actually entitled is based on the length of service. If you look and see earlier, I say when I showed it to you earlier, and then the payment bracket here. The payment bracket here, this is the one that I said that we were going to look at it in detail later on. And of course, the number of service that you work with a company. So very clear scenario. But in some countries, like I think especially in in UK. In UK, they put an additional requirement like what age you are. So if you are 22, if you are 45, probably your bracket is different. So you are entitled on different category. So for Malaysia, we have only, regardless of what age you are, it all depends on how long that you work with the company, and then the payment going to be based on that. When we earlier we were looking into how the World Bank do the calculation, I was having a discussion with some people from MOHR, from Labor Department, and many, and then from the world, those who actually practitioner will answer the questions. I would say none of us are actually very clear about how actually World Banks do the calculations. And I would take the initiative to start calling them and asking, and then finally notice that the calculation that they make is actually because of the scenario they give in the Ease of Doing Business survey. They are putting brackets of individual. They ask a question in the survey that how much that you actually entitled for wages, redundancy pay for this if you are working for 1 year, that's it. And then they said the second category that they put in is that severance pay of workers that are working with 5 years or more, okay, with 5 years. And then you have another requirement that the question that they asked in the survey is that more than, with 10 years or more, I said. So this question, they put 1 year, 5 years, and 10 years. So if you look at it carefully, the question that they put in the survey, 1 year, for our case, fall into the first category, which is 10 days. The 10 days, as our category have 2 years and less. So the 1 year fall under 2 years and less, then automatically we apply, they are entitled for 10 days. So under the scheme, under this calculation, the World Bank are using 6 days a week. So if we take a 10 days time by 1 year of service, divide by 6, you've got 1.7 weeks. So their entitlement, if you are actually 1 year in the company, you are entitled to have 1.7 weeks salary. For the second category, this is the cash that we are actually caught into. In the question, they was asking about 5 years. And if you look at our category, it's between 2 to 5 years. So 2 to 5 years, our entitlement is actually, remember this, we have 15 days, 2 to 5 years. Anything more than 5 years, we automatically go to 20 days. So if you look at this calculation, for those who work for 5 years, and then automatically 20 days is applied. 20, the second category, 20 days time by 5 divided by 6, you got 16.7 weeks. And of course, for the third question that they asked in the employee, in the ease of doing business survey, is fall under 20 days. So because you are more than 5 years, 10 years is more than 5 years. So 20 days time by 10 and divide by 6, you get 33.33. So all in all, if you take that and divide by 3 of this, then you got 17.2, exactly as the score that was given to us throughout the year from 2010 until 2020. We actually have a score of 17.2 because we never change. We never change this bracket, we never change this category. So we are there, and then our score is always 17.2. So if you look at the ranking of other nations, and then some best practice by other nations, I just want to share. I'm not going to go in detail very much because I don't think we have much time to explain on this. But I look at Australia. Australia have a range of severance pay between 4 to 16 weeks. So if you look at it, it makes sense. 4 to 16 weeks. I will see how the calculation later on in detail. And then you have United Kingdom. United Kingdom, as I mentioned earlier, for them, for those who work less than 2 years, you are not entitled. So if you need to be, continuously working for one company more than 2 years, then you are entitled for redundancy pay. And then if you are under 22, then you get some numbers of years. If you are more than that, then probably you get some 42 years old, maybe different category. So they have an age category here. So this is what some of the initiative that I can capture. In Hong Kong, it's a similar scenario, but again, I just want to highlight that it's applicable only for those who are more than 2 years. I mean, if you work there for more than 2 years, then you are entitled to a statutory payment. And then Taiwan, of course, they have some initiative there. But I just want to share with you some top ranking country. The top ranking country that score #1 country. Just take three countries we are familiar with. Singapore. They don't have a statutory severance payment. They are not, what do you call it, friendly to the employee, or they don't, I'm not interested to protect the employees. No, they have a different scheme. We will talk about this, but they have a requirement in their scenario that you need to not give a notice, some kind of notice, that for those people who fall under the Employment Act. So you need to give a notice of redundancy. But again, that's the only governing factors that are under the law for Singapore. But they don't have a statutory requirement that you need to pay a certain number of weeks for severance pay. Same goes to New Zealand. New Zealand also don't have a statutory severance pay. Japan also don't have a statutory severance pay, as we can see. But of course, there are some practices here and there that they are followed through. But again, if you look at it, these nations are not, protect their employees? No, I think they are probably one of those nations who actually adopted a different approach to protect their employee. Again, as I said, severance pay scheme is an old practice, so they are moving into a different area. So that's why for WCY, they consider this as a good practice. And then if you look at our neighbor, like in Indonesia, of course, the ranking is worse than us. They don't have a statutory requirement for redundancy. I mean, any organization cannot make yourself redundant. So they don't. It's not by law. It don't allow that. So they have an agreement that by Employment Acts and things like that, that if you want to lay off them, then there's different things that you need to pay, but it's not redundancy. So in Indonesia, redundancy is not allowable, but company cannot lay off people because of redundancy. And then Thailand, you can see there are some categories of sovereign pay that you need to pay. Of course, I'm not going to detail because we don't have time. Philippines also the same thing. So the category of Philippines, the scoring of the Philippines may be higher than us. So I probably say that the ranking are getting worse than us for that matter. My recommendations, as you can see earlier, Malaysia need to review our Employment Act 1955. We have not reviewed the Employment Act 1955, and then we have an employment regulations, termination and layoff benefit since 1980. We are not doing anything about it. I would suggest that if we want to change this, if we want to raise our ranking, then the sovereign payment bracket need to be changed. We are being one of those nations that are very, I would say, generous for the payment. But we can be generous for the payment, but we can adjust it accordingly. And that's how, if you look at it, Malaysia had not changed till today. From 1980, the category bracket that was given, blah, blah, until now, we have not changed. If you look at it, the country, this is the report that I got it from World Bank. They make a comparison between this nation and of course they have a lot more. I just list out only a couple country, 2013 and until 2017. If you see the changes that take place in Portugal, take place in Taiwan, even Laos have changed their bracket from 2013. You can see the bracket of category of payment are changed. They become less generous, of course, and they are working on other approach to make it redundancy payment is not something that being a burdensome to the industry. If you look at Malaysia, we have not changed. Nothing changed. From 2013 until 2017 in this comparison, but actually from 1980 we have not changed. We have not changed. Even you see the score 2010 WCY score. I didn't go further back, but if you look at it 2010 until now, we still got score 17.2 days, and this is what are very alarming to us. And if you look at it, if you want to raise the ranking, and if you look at this, I take an example of Australia. The Australia bracket, they have, remember I said, a 4 to 16 week. Because of this category, because of the question given by the World Bank, so the sovereign pay for dismissal for those who work at a tenure over 1 year, they have 4 weeks. For us, it's 10 weeks. And then if we look at it, sovereign redundancy for those who are actually with 5 years. So that means the second category of them is they're having a 10 weeks. So that means probably, I'm not sure if we look in detail, the range of 5 years and below is 10 weeks. And 5 years and maybe more, or maybe in this case for 10 years, they have a 12 week. So they have another 16 week maybe for 20 years, I think. So because of this calculation, 4, 10 weeks and 12 weeks redundancy payment, and then you get about 8.7 weeks on average, and the score ranking by Australia is at number 34. It's better than us, 52, by changing the category. So that's why I strongly suggest. I have no answer in terms of category that what should be adopted, what we should be taking into picture, because if I say lesser number, then more people will get angry with me. But I think in this case that we need to adjust so that it won't be some burdensome, and then if we adjust it accordingly, maybe we can actually raise our ranking based on the less number of weeks of salary that we need to pay under redundancy cost. The second option, which I strongly supported for Malaysia to adopt, is to do away with the statutory payment. Malaysia should be moving toward EIS, employee insurance scheme. These are the practice that have been adopted by all these developed nations under AAC. This is all the practice that we can see that those who score number 1 from Austria until USA. Many of them actually adopt including the New Zealand, adopt the employee insurance scheme. And recently in 2017, SOCSO has introduced our employee insurance scheme, and this one only I do some checking here for SOCSO one is good. It's a good way of moving toward that directions. The chances now is that hopefully SOCSO will review it, because I saw it is only applicable for those who are working and earning about 4,000 and less. So it can fall under the EIS that launched by the SOCSO. I wish that that SOCSO can move further and to include for those who have earning more than that. So high time that now the company are working with the governments on this area, that moving into EIS. EIS is something that like insurance. I mean, that you never know that you're going to be one of those severance that are going to be paid. So it's just like a medical benefit that you need to work upon. There are many kind of formula. I mean, contribution by the employee themselves, contribution by the company them, how much is the portion like, and so on. I do not know in detail, but because there are too many ways of doing for this the employees insurance scheme. But I think this is the direction that we need to undertake. And believe me, I think if we want to be among the top nation of the world in this redundancy cause, and especially under WCY scheme, under WCY ranking, we need to move into this employee insurance scheme. With that, I think I would like to stop my presentation at the moment, and unless there is some discussion or some question that was given to me, then I probably pass back this session to Mr. Wong.
Yes, Kabir. Thank you. So we are now open for questions from participants who have joined this webinar today. So any questions, please? Please feel free to type the questions in your question box. Yeah? There should be a question box for you in this webinar, and you can type out your questions there, and I will relay the question to our speaker for him to explain or to answer your queries. So we are waiting for questions, Kabir.
Okay.
So probably while waiting, let me kick off by asking a question.
All right.
So you were talking about different years of service, in terms of redundancy costs. I think you mentioned World Bank measure using 1 year of service, and then 5 years of service, and 10 years of service, and then take the average to come out with, for Malaysia, I think it was 17 weeks, I think, something like that.
17.2, yeah.
17.2 weeks, yeah. So, and it's a little bit different from the way our local authorities measure, right? It's like more than 2 years and 2 to 5 years and so on. So I was thinking, based on your findings, your research, is there these are statutory requirements by the government or authorities, but in terms of companies in the private sector, multinational companies, public listed companies of Malaysia, SME type of companies, do you find a big variation in terms of the severance payment or severance compensation that they're giving to redundant employees?
You see,
is that like a big variation? Yeah.
Okay. Again, as I say, I'm like to go back to the Malaysian Employment Acts. This redundancy payment is only applicable to those people who fall under the Employment Act. And those Employment Act, as I said, is for those who are earning less than 2,000. So the category that dictated by the MOHR or by Labour Department, this is the amount that they need to pay. Of course, based on 2 years, 2 to 5 years, more than 5 years. So this category is dictated by Labour and is statutory. I mean, it's something that whether you are from any multinational, whether you are actually coming from different government, government-linked company, and so on, you are still to have to pay minimum. Again, I said minimum. But if the company decided, I mean, like in the case of VSS, so let's say Petronas want to do the VSS, it is a voluntary. If you look at it for officer, definitely automatically they are not applicable under the law. So not applicable under the law because of their salary scheme is very higher. So you're going for the VSS. So of course the VSS is something that optional. Of course you need to attract for them to decide, volunteer to apply and go for the VSS. So this kind of scenario, you can see different between one multinational company to another. We don't have a specific or fixed rate that you need to follow for these people. But for those who are earning 2,000 below and under Employment Act or Malaysian Employment Act, automatically you need to follow that whether you are multinational or not. But again, as I said, this is the direction that I would probably suggest, because some organizations have their own employment acts, their own employment agreement. When you sign to join Motorola, your contractual agreement is there. So this contractual agreement is between you and that particular organization. So when you are going to be, they're going to make yourself redundant in this, and all they want to, in the case of asking for you to leave the organization, this is the amount that you need to pay, because based on the contractual agreement that you have with the organization, but not under the statutory requirement that we are seeing earlier. All right. I hope I answer you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I was thinking those days, I think during the Asian financial crisis, there were quite a lot of companies having to lay off people or employees. And I remember, because I had friends working in Malaysia Airlines, and they were saying MAS was paying 1.5 months of severance pay per year of service for people who have worked more than 10 years, that kind of thing. And then I also compared with other multinationals, of course not SME, but bigger companies, especially multinationals, and they were paying like 1 year to 1.5 years, 1 month to 1.5 months of severance pay for every year of service, until a maximum of, if I'm not mistaken, 30 months of pay, depending on your years of service. So if a person worked 20 years already in the company and got laid off, he would like get 30 months of pay, straight away, 2.5 years of pay. So that's the thing. But I understand that in the World Bank's measurement, and also in Malaysia MOHR labor law, it is more to protect the lower income group. That's why it's 2,000 and below. So the higher income, it is left to the employee and employer arrangement, the agreement, when they sign the agreement for employment. So for Malaysia, then, is this the way that we should go? I mean, to allow or to change the statutory requirement so that there is this employment agreement between employee and employer, even for category category of pay that is 2,000 and below. Your opinion, please.
Yes, that's why I was strongly propose that, because if we go for the employee insurance schemes, because this employee insurance scheme is basically about redundancy severance payment, but it's not going to be paid by the company. Because if you look at it naturally, when the now under the COVID scenario, as I said earlier, 750,000 people have been laid off. I mean, it's a lot of money have to be paid if you look at it, the children pay. And this company need money. So if you take from the coffer of this company and pay for the employee on because of they are being redundant, because they are no longer, can survive. Imagine the company going to be go bankrupt. But if you have a schemes, an insurance scheme, let the insurance pay. Let the scheme itself taken care. Of course, if you go for the employee agreement that you have, let's say you join Motorola, you sign the agreement with Motorola. Of course, in this case, in this different scenario, because the agreement that you have is between you and the Motorola, and you can take them to the court if they don't pay, what the obligation to you. I would suggest that's when we go for this employee insurance scheme, every single individual who work in Malaysia, every single individual, regardless of your pay scheme, the company must have an EIS for you. That means something like KWSP lah. I mean, you pay some portion of KWSP, and then in case to do a protection to you, if you have been laid off, the money that come from that coffer will go to you. So that is something that I think is worthwhile to be considered by MOHR. Maybe in this case of coming out with the do away with, of course, the statutory requirement, but of course they have to make some kind of requirement for all the company practice in Malaysia to adopt EIS. And not the one that currently we have a good one. A good initiative by SOCSO, but still not enough. I think it's because they have still a category about 4,000 ringgit below. So if you are employed, but then you have to fall back into the scheme or your own scheme. That was in Singapore. In Singapore, majority of the they have severance pay, but majority are actually based on the agreement, the employment agreement that you have with the company.
And if Malaysia follow these best practices, let's say, these good practices from these countries, it would be improve our score and rank, right, for this, because of the way WCY measure. They only look at the statutory requirement part, right? They don't measure based on what is the practice in the industry. Am I right to say that?
Yes, that's why I said if you look at the bracket of requirements, if we adjust it, that's why I say if we are smart enough, we adjust it accordingly. Now, instead of removing completely, but we adjust it. Our bracket, that means we just put it, let's say we are allowable for those who are 1 year to 2 years, let's say, right? 1 year to 2 years. And we probably say that, okay, 10 days or 5 days, let's say and then for the second category, instead of more than 5 years, between 2 to 5, now because of the question by the World Bank, they are putting you that for 5 years or more. That means we adjust our second category. Let's say if we put 2 to 5 years, I mean, instead of 5 years, 2 to 5 years, 5 years and above. 5 years and above, you fall into third category already. So for me, is that bring it down the 5 years and above, 5 years to the second category, then at least you can get a 15 days. If you want to retain the category bracket, but if that, let's say we smart work and we adjust it to 12 days, let's say the second category instead of 15, we go to 10 or maybe 12 days. We adjust a little bit, but 2 to 5 years, that is what mean 2 to 5 years, not mean 5 years or more. 5 years or more, you fall under the category 3. You understand my adjustment? That this is something that very tricky, that I do not know why the World Bank do that way, but because of that category calculation, then they automatically fall. They are using only the first category 1, and then the second category none, because both are 5 years and 10 years. It fall under the third category for us in Malaysia. So I would suggest that we adjust like Australia did. Australia have fall in a second category that fall under 5 years.
Okay, so you are saying adjust our categories of severance payment according to be aligned to the WCY's way of measurement, the way they put the categories. Yeah.
If we want to, I mean, we want to improve the ranking directly. I mean, to me, that is the shortest way of doing things. But if personally, on my own opinion, I think we should move like looking into what the developed nation do. I mean, go for the schemes.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, on the one hand, we need to still safeguard the welfare of employees, especially those from the lower income group, from this being laid off and then having difficulty to survive, especially in this era now, this current situation now. We don't want them to be victimized by unscrupulous employers. On the other hand, we also want, of course, to make Malaysia more competitive. And since redundancy cost is a criteria, one of the criteria to measure competitiveness of a country, so we want to try to have a win-win situation of both, I think. Yeah. So based on your suggestion, it is possible. We can still safeguard, make sure that employees who are laid off get a proper severance or get proper protection in terms of income before they find the next job.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we also improve our ranking. Yeah, for this WCY 2020. Yeah, especially. Okay, that's a good one, I think. Yeah.
I really hope MOHR look into this, because this is something we have not changed. I mean, for when I look through, one of the area that I actually been tremendously a lot of changes is this area for other nations, and we are staying the same from those days until now. I mean, why we are not looking into it? Why we are not reviewing this? I'm not saying that they're not doing the job, but I was wondering why we have not doing it for so long.
Okay, I think I have a question here. Let me just read out the question. Yeah. Okay, it just came up on my question box. So hang on. Yeah. Okay, I'm struggling to read out the question because the box is very small. Okay, the question says, curious about our statutory requirement on redundancy. Apart from number of years of service, are there other factors considered? Okay, apart from number of years of service, are there other factors considered in this redundancy cost? Other factors such as the age of the employee, the character of employee, availability of similar employment, wrongful dismissal. So that's the question.
Okay, thank you for the question. I'm not sure from who.
I do not know, so it's not mentioned here. Sorry.
All right, it's okay. The thing is like this. Okay, for Malaysia, there are two. I mean, for you to, as I said repeatedly, for you to fall under the redundancy scheme, you must be earning less than 2,000 ringgit. This is under the statutory requirement. And then there's some exception for those, like a machine operator. Even though they have a 5,000 ringgit per month, they are also apply. For those who are actually doing the work physically, so they are also fall under this category. And their supervisor that work with them on this also apply. If they are earning more than 2,000, they fall under the Malaysian Act. So they fall under the redundancy. When you use for the calculation for how much you are actually entitled, they only use the number of service. Character-wise, whether they like you or they don't like you, that's not an issue. Well, the age, whether you are 22, whether you are 45, is also not considered. In UK, yes, as I said earlier, in UK they consider the age, but it is a very rare one. I think I'm not sure why UK they consider the age. Maybe they consider those people who are working longer. I mean, the age is elderly people. Probably they should be entitled for more. Maybe make more sense there. But other nation that I come across, I hardly find people are using age as one of the what do you call it, criteria. For Malaysia, we only use number of years service. and based on number of years of service, then the entitlement will be calculated. Of course, if you go under VSAS, it's a different matter. The VSAS, you can use back the formula, but of course, VSAS normally probably higher. There, as you said earlier, I mean the payment is going to be higher than this is a minimum. A statutory requirement is a minimum payment that you need to give to the employee who are going to be exit from the company. And then the approval, you need to get the approval from Labor Department. You cannot simply, decided to do the undertake the redundancy or severance payment to any of your staff just like that. No, you are not allowed to do that. You have to show or proof of evidence that the work that you or the reason why you're applying for redundancy. So you have to let the Labor Department know, and then once you got the approval, can only is apply. I hope I answer the question, but again, as I said, if we think that other criteria is important, then maybe like the age factors and so on, then this is why we need to review it. I think I'm not the expert of again, as I said, human resource, but we need to have some review in this area, so that we probably coming out with a better scheme that everybody can enjoy it. All right.
Okay, I'm just sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. I missed out the name of the person who asked that question. Actually, it was stated, Mr. Jaden Key. Mr. Jaden Key asked that question.
I see. Thank you.
So there's a second question here, and this question is from Muhammad Aizuddin Nur Azman. Muhammad Aizuddin Nur Azman, and the question goes like this. As you mentioned, severance pay is only applicable to those workers who are waged below RM 2,000 ringgit. Nowadays, we have graduate engineers who works for less than RM 2,000. From my point of view, the severance pay is good because it will serve as a driver for the employer to promote the worker's salary and position. Do you agree with this? Your opinion on this?
Okay, thank you, Azudin. Good morning for the question. It's a tricky question, actually. Again, as I said, I will give you my opinion about this. For those situations that, if you are an engineer, I mean, you are earning less than 2,000 ringgit, whether you apply under it, yeah, you do. Because the moment you are governed by the Malaysian Employment Act, you are governed by that. But the moment you have been, your salary go beyond the cap, it's 2,000 ringgit. Let's say after 1 year that you've been your salary been raised to 3,000 ringgit. That's it. You are no longer applicable under the Malaysian Employment Act. So automatically you are not entitled for severance pay. This is again where I said when you have this scenario, then you are at the mercy because you are an engineer. You are not somebody who is actually physically doing the work that you're entitled for that. If you are a machine operator, that will fall under the category, the exemption. In this case, 5,000 ringgit also is allowable, or 10,000 ringgit is also allowable. But if you are an engineer, I mean, you're probably using more brain than physical effort, then you are not entitled for that. So what happened here? This is again, that's why I'm saying that in the current scenario, if you do have an employment act, your own agreement between you and the company, then is good. You are safe. Probably you fall back under the employment act that you within you and the company. Then is for them to treat you differently, or to make you redundant. At least it makes more sense. Then you have to pay you some amount of money that you agreed before. But this is why I'm saying that not all companies would like to do that, because at the moment when you join the company, most of you probably just sign and you do not know what are the contractual obligation of the company to you. And from one company to another company, you probably have a good, friendly company that would like to give you more, or obliged to give you more, or care about the employee, and they probably allow you some kind of payment that is make more sense. But if you do, if the company are unscrupulous, I mean, they don't care about you. They probably don't have that segment that you, when you leave, when they fire you, and you are not entitled. Again, when dismissal is again different, and then you can bring to the court. But when they work on the redundancy, this is the one that is tricky. That's why I was really want that if the moment you join the company, go for employment insurance. The one that actually is also doing is the right direction. Believe me, it's the right direction. It's also doing a good thing there. But now I would request if there is people who here that can convey the message to the SOXO people that bring or raise the cap. Let maybe so those who 10,000 people or 15,000 ringgit, for people like you, Mr. Wong, when you, of course, you have a different agreement with the company, so we don't need a severance pay for that. So I would suggest that we need to go the severance payment, but not statutory requirement, but go into the at least we have a contractual agreement between company that quoted on the severance pay. I hope you got, Mr. Azuddin got the message, and Mr. Wong, I know you muted again.
I muted again. So sorry, muted. Yeah, I'm saying it's clear. Yeah, it's clear to me. Yeah, thank you for your reply to Mr. Azuddin's question. Looks like we don't have any other questions at the moment. Those are the two questions that we have. So before we come to the end of the talk today, any final comments or words from you, Encik Kabir, related to the topic today?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do not want to, put MPC in a situations that been bombarded by some people. The idea and the opinion that I give is actually my personal opinions. It's not something that condones or agreeable by MPC for that matter. So if anybody down there you're not happy with the suggestion, but based on my study and my research and my investigation, I think the suggestion that I put in is something that we need to undertake, and I really would say that MOHR need to seriously look into this. Of course, it's not going to be if we're going to change it, not for this year, maybe because of a situation on the COVID. Maybe we can study the situation, and we can propose it the moment the COVID situation is over, and for the future benefits of the future employees, at least we will be governed by some scheme that is better than what we have now. I strongly request the MOHR, because they are the agency that is responsible for this initiative, and we can work for this. And that's why I said MBF, that's why the employee federations, Malaysia, the MTUC need to agree on this. This is not a shortcut, but it's something that I think going to be a win-win situation for all. I think with that, thank you so much. Once again, thank you so much for MPC to giving me this platform to share my thinkings on this subject. Thank you, Mr. Wong, and thank you to you too.
Okay, thank you, Encik Kabir, for a captivating and enlightening talk on the topic of redundancy cost today. And also, I would like to thank all those who have joined our webinar today for taking precious time out from your busy schedule to participate in this talk. And I wish everyone here good day and a productive rest of the week ahead. So stay healthy, stay safe, and as much as possible, remember, stay home in this COVID-19 era now. So goodbye, everybody. See you all again. Bye-bye.
Take care and stay safe. Assalamualaikum.